What if we all had a form of multiple personality disorder? Well, let's not put it in the disorder bracket, as that's kind of got negative connotations. But what if we all fundamentally had multiple personalities? Well, perhaps it'll surprise you to know, but that's exactly how I see our human condition. Each apparent individual is a collection of distinct perspectives. Now, multiple personality disorder, nowadays referred to as Dissociative Identity Disorder, DID for short, is where these distinct perspectives or whole personalities live within or through an individual in very dissociated or independent ways, often divorced from each other and in a sense not integrated in a healthy way. Now, studies of this disorder have shown remarkable evidence for the mind's power to have a direct and near instant impact on the physiology of our bodies. It points to amazing possibilities for us all, and in this episode we're going to explore what the research shows us and how you might be able to benefit from it. So stay with me and let's get into it. Welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast with me, Joel Young. If you're looking to improve your life, to heal, to grow and mature as an individual, but maybe you found that some of the personal development and consciousness stuff has given you the impression that you need to be super serious and vigilant to get anywhere meaningful, or feeling like maybe you're just not up to snuff, well, this show is here to remind you of your humanity, and in fact that's where your true joy and brilliance lies. With over 25 years of experience in the transformation biz and having developed MPA, one of the world's simplest, pressure-free approaches to growth and well-being, if I do say so myself, I'll be sharing tips, steps, and insights that'll help you navigate all the aspects of life as a growth-seeking being. On this show, it comes to you with a good dose of humour, maybe a smattering of colourful language, a reminder not to take things so personally, and most importantly, to be kind to yourself along the way. Make sure you hit that follow button, and let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast with me, Joel Young. I'm delighted that you're here. We are at episode number 128, which means, first of all, you can go to the show notes at www.beabrillianthuman.com/128. That's the numbers, not as words. It also means there's 127 previous episodes for you to binge on. Hurrah! And once you finish this, especially if you're new to the show, and if you are, welcome, good to have you here, go check them out. You can search on, if you go to the website, again, beabrillianthuman.com, go to episodes, you can hit the search and search topics you want to find. Or if you're listening on your sort of favorite podcast platform, you can have a look, scroll through the different offerings, see what takes your fancy, or even, as I've heard from some people they do, go back to number one and binge from the beginning, like some massive Netflix full bank holiday weekend binge out. Let me know if you do that. I'd be very, very impressed. So today we're talking about multiple personalities. Dissociative Identity Disorder, DID for short. Now, it bears saying that I'm no sort of clinical psychologist. I've got no doctorate. I'm just a fella who's worked in the field of personal development, spirituality, and sort of areas of philosophy for, I don't know, coming up 30 years now, who has an opinion. However, for this episode, this is an area that's fascinated me for a long time. I'd heard various things. I tried to find some of the stories I've heard. I tried to find some sort of actual quotable evidence of it online. I did find a couple of really fascinating papers, which I am going to lean into. So at least there's some kind of, it's not just my perspective, basis for what I'm telling you today. I will put links to the two particular papers that I'm using today. One is called Probing the Enigma of Multiple Personality by Daniel Goleman, which is on NewYorkTimes.com and was published in 1988. And a more recent one, which is on Scientific American in their blog section, which has the intriguing title, Could Multiple Personality Disorder Explain Life, the Universe, and Everything? What? say all the Hitchhiker's Guides fans. Isn't the answer 42? Anyway, I digress. But that one's by a number of people: Bernardo Kastrup, Adam Crabtree, and Edward F. Kelly, and that was published in June of 2018, not that long ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of go through some of the bits of the articles, share some stories that really point to the incredible power of our mind to impact way faster than you might think our physiology. Have a little look at what that might mean for us, and then talk a bit about MPA and the non-personal philosophy, because it very much fits in with these possibilities and that how that may be of interest to you and something that you can take away, because this is largely kind of going to be like, oh, that's really fascinating kind of episode, but I always like to throw a bit of practical in there. What can you do that will help you make the most of the information that I'm sharing today? Also, this is a sponsored episode, sponsored by yours truly, again, actually by the Harmony Equation, where we really do work with identities and resolving conflict between identities and parts within us, which is coming up real soon. If you're listening to this on the day that it comes out, then it's not long to go before our next round of the event. It's a live event, and I'd love you to come along. And there's an ad at some point. I'll put it somewhere in this show. I'll drop the ad, which is kind of, I had fun making them. And I hope it encourages you to go and click the button. If you're keen to know where that's going to be, I'll let you know right up front. You have to go to www.thenpaacademy.com/harmony. Dead simple. Just thenpaacademy.com/harmony. All right, so let's get into multiple personalities. Probably a terrible joke. Let's do it. So I said I was going to lean into these articles. Really, I'm going to read some of them. I'll basically read chunks, give you some comment. I'll paraphrase some bits and kind of tie it all together. Really, my intention is to, because I could tell you, here's what I've heard. And I've heard stories that are even more stronger than the ones I'm going to read you here. I might mention them. We'll see how I feel as we go along. But I want to actually sort of really quote these papers. That's why I'm going to link them so you can read the whole thing if you want to go and check it out. But let's start with, like, what's the history of multiple personality disorder. So this is taken directly from the Could Multiple Personality Disorder Explain Life, the Universe, and Everything, from American Scientific. It says the history of this condition dates back to the early 19th century, with a flurry of cases in the 1880s and through the 1920s, and again from the 1960s to the late 1990s. The massive literature on the subject confirms the consistent and uncompromising sense of separateness experienced by the alter personalities. Now, there's a couple of bits of terminology I've come across. So alter personalities is one of the ways that the clinicians refer to the different personalities. They also talk about switching. Switching is their term for when someone changes from one personality to the other. And this goes on. It also displays compelling evidence that the human psyche is constantly active in producing personal units of perception and action that might be needed to deal with the challenges of life. We're going to come back to that statement because that's very important. But it goes on. Although we may be at a loss to explain precisely how this creative process occurs, because it unfolds almost totally beyond the reach of self-reflective introspection, the clinical evidence nevertheless forces us to acknowledge something is happening that has important implications for our views about what is and what is not possible in nature. I love that they say that. That, to me, American Scientific, and you guys that wrote this, I love you. There's so much dogma in science as there is in religion and even personal and spiritual growth. But that to me opens the doors of possibility. There is so much that happens in nature that we don't understand, and once we have an understanding of it, hurrah! It's great to have some understanding, but it's never the final story because there's always more to learn. At least that's my opinion. There's lots of these cases What fascinates me, though, is the things that we've seen, the things that they've seen and studied and have scientific records of cases where the different personalities exhibit different physiology, lots of different ones. Let me give an example from the same article. So in 2015, doctors in Germany reported the extraordinary case of a woman who suffered from what has traditionally been called multiple personality disorder, and today is known as dissociative identity disorder, or DID. The woman exhibited a variety of dissociated personalities, or alters, some of which claimed to be blind. Now, using EEGs, the doctors were able to ascertain that the brain activity normally associated with sight wasn't present while a blind alter was in control of the woman's body, even though her eyes were open. Remarkably, when a sighted alter assumed control, the usual brain activity returned. This was a compelling demonstration of the literally blinding power of extreme forms of dissociation, a condition in which the psyche gives rise to multiple, operationally separate centers of consciousness, each within its own private inner life. Boom! Different personality, that's the psychology, that's the body is the same body within one personality, and let's think about this is really important. Your personality is like a conglomeration of beliefs, ideas, emotions, and behaviors. When you shift those, or when they shift, when the identity changes, then the physiology is changed to the point where literally in one personality, the sight operators don't work, and yet in another one, they come back. That's like, I was blind and now I can see, right? Right there. They've got examples of that happening. But wait, there's more. Let's hop over to the New York Times article by Daniel Goleman. He starts with a story. When Timmy drinks orange juice, he has no problem. But Timmy is just one of close to a dozen personalities who alternate control over a patient with multiple personality disorder. And if those other personalities drink orange juice, this results in the case of hives. The hives will occur even if Timmy drinks orange juice and another personality appears while the juice is still being digested. What's more, if Timmy comes back while the allergic reaction is present, the itching of the hives will cease immediately and the water-filled blisters will begin to subside. So again, to the point where the skin, blisters, hives can come and go, or have an effect or not have an effect based on which personality. What is the psychology that's operating, determining how we're affected by substances? So hopefully you're getting the idea that we're breaking down this idea. It's a purely physical thing, pure chemical. If you have a body that's set this way, then you'll have certain allergies or certain things. The determining factor in Timmy's case was what personality was operating. Who are you? What? Who are you being, really? We're going to get to that later. There's an interesting comment here in this article. Dr. Bennett Braun is being quoted. We're finding the most graphic demonstrations to date of the power of the mind to affect the body. One of the reasons I love this article is it really, they're looking at it and going, wow, how the mind affects the body. This is 88, so it's a while ago now. I think we come a lot further, but it still points to that, the seeds of where, in quotes, science is really beginning to understand the mind-body connection. It goes on, if the mind can do this in tearing down body tissues, which is what it's doing there, I think it suggests the same potential for healing. Amen. So again, really, really powerful. And it goes on, this article. I'm going to sort of just race through some of the other examples that they've got here because they're fascinating. So frequently, for example, personalities will differ in handwriting, artistic talent, or even in knowledge of foreign languages. So in one personality, they speak foreign languages. Another one, they just don't get access to them. So access to memories, access to certain things. And actually, quite when I did my reading, there's quite a lot about the impact of how multiple personalities or DID has a direct link to memories. One personality doesn't have access to previous memories, and there's a lot of study on how a large part of the thinking, although there's some disagreement, is that a lot of this actual sort of full-on clinical DID diagnosis comes from people who've experienced trauma when they're very young, and part of the thinking behind it is that it's a survival strategy to create a second personality or multiple personalities to avoid having to experience those previous memories. The other thing they cite here is they see abrupt appearance and disappearance of rashes. Pretty straightforward. Welts, again, pretty quick. Now here's a biggie. The abrupt, and I prephrase it, abrupt appearance and disappearance of scars. Now let that one sink in, and other tissue wounds. Now scars, surely we know scars don't go away. But if in one personality scar tissue shows up and another personality there's no scar there, that's pretty damn amazing. Especially, and one of the points I wanted to make on this show is that we have a kind of a limit on our idea of how fast the body can heal, how the body can shift its physiology. It takes time to heal. And one of the ways I think of it is the general human consciousness sets limits. It's a bit like Roger Bannister in the 4-Minute Mile. Until once he broke that a perceived barrier, it's impossible to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Once he broke it, the general perception amongst humanity was it's possible to do it, and suddenly more people could do it. So I love it for that. It's also got switches in handwriting and even handedness, left hand or right handed, depending on the personality that's active. Epilepsy, again, epilepsy, which is completely gone in one personality and is present in another. That really shakes up the thinking around the condition of epilepsy. Allergies, color blindness, that strikes only when a given personality is in control of the body. So it's really fascinating that these different things is literally come and go. In fact, sight is one of the things that has been shown. I read somewhere in one of these articles that they have patients who are diagnosed with DID, and they keep a number of different glasses around because they don't know which personality is going to be in charge, because they have completely different eyesight based on the personality that's operating, which is kind of fascinating. In fact, there's a bit here. It says one of those reports will be on a study by Scott Miller, a psychologist at the University of Utah, of optical differences in people with multiple personalities. Dr. Miller had an ophthalmologist. I'm sure there's a personality in me that can say that properly. So an ophthalmologist gave a battery of standard optical tests to 10 patients and a control group of non-patients. After each battery, the ophthalmologist would leave the room while the patient switched personality, sometimes at will and sometimes with prompting, then return and repeat the test. The study included a control group of another 10 people who feigned switching personalities unknown to the examiner to remove the potential source of bias. Now here's the clinch. The study, which will be published in the journal of, must be published by now, Nervous and Mental Disease, found that there was significant changes in visual acuity in the shape and curvature of the eye and in the refraction from personality to personality. In the real patients, that was, but hardly any among the others tested. So the fact that the eye is one of those things where we already understand, because now you can get laser eye surgery, it can heal and change very quickly. But those descriptions are how the eye actually changes its sort of its shape, its viscosity, all those different things very quickly, because personalities can change in sort of seconds or minutes maybe, and the physiology can change along with that. There's more on eyes. It says one patient had his left eye injured in a fight, so that it turned out, but the condition only appeared in one of his personalities. It disappeared in the others, nor was there any evidence of muscle imbalance. So again, it's like, One personality, an injured eye, another personality, no injured eye. The stories that I heard that I couldn't find on the internet today when I started to plan this episode. I have heard stories though of people that are literally wheelchair bound in one personality and walk absolutely fine in another. I've heard examples even of multiple personality people where their cancer cells show up in a particular personality. Another personality is completely cancer free. Again, all pointing to this same amazing power of the sort of the identity that we hold, with a personality that's active, has the power to shift our physiology. Another fascinating thing I read, which is also in this article in the New York Times, is about the different reactions to drug treatments based on the active personality. Apparently, it's a bit of an issue, really, because when you're, in the clinical psychology approach or psychiatry, they use various drugs. So let me read this bit. One of the problems for psychiatrists trying to treat patients with multiple personalities is that depending which personality is in control, the patient can have drastically different reactions to a given psychiatric medication. So again, the dogma goes, well, I can diagnose you, give you a drug, and that will have its treatment based on your physiology, etc. But the psychology seems to play a big role. It goes on, for instance, it is almost always the case that one or several of the personalities of a given patient will be that of a child, and the differences in responses to drugs among the subpersonalities often parallel those ordinarily found when the same drug at the same dose is given to a child rather than an adult. There's an example. Another patient, 5 milligrams of diazepam, a tranquilizer, sedated one personality, while 100 milligrams had little effect on another personality. So, again, this whole thing brings into the power of the physiology. I'll often say, in the way I look at it, is it's not the sort of what substances you put in your mouth. It's the sponsoring energy or the intention behind it that can have a massive difference. In other words, who's drinking that beer? Is it someone's drinking it for sadness? They're going to get a sad response. Or someone drinking it for joy? They're going to get a joy response. And I believe the body has a tremendous capacity to deal with these things. It's not so cut and dry that this substance or this amount of substance is good for you or bad for you. Now, interestingly, it's only recently that they've been able to measure things like brain patterns and stuff like that to demonstrate very clearly there is a distinctness. There's a something that happens within these particular cases of DID. So I'm going to read again, going back to the American Scientist article. It says, modern neuroimaging techniques have demonstrated that DID is real. In a 2014 study, doctors performed functional brain scans on both DID patients and actors simulating DID. The scans of the actual patients displayed clear differences when compared to those of the actors, showing that dissociation has an identifiable neural activity fingerprint. In other words, there's a thing. It's a something which can be demonstrated with a fingerprint in terms of brain scans. In other words, there is something rather particular that dissociative processes look like in the brain. It goes on, there's also compelling clinical data showing that different alters, remember alters being personalities, can be concurrently conscious and see themselves as distinct identities. Here's where we're starting to get close to how most of us live, aware of our different parts, right? One of us, they say, that means one of the people that wrote this article, has written an extensive treatment of evidence for this distinctness of identity and the complex forms of interactive memory that accompany it, particularly in those extreme cases of DID that are usually referred to as multiple personality disorder. So they're starting to measure what it looks like. What is the way the brain is functioning that allows for these changes? Now, today I'm not going to say we should all go into a disorder state of multiple personality, but I am looking at it in terms of, well, there's a function that's happening. there's something where different personalities, and if we reduce that to what we might call a healthy personality, different parts of ourselves, you can't pretend it. They showed that because actors, you can pretend, but when you're being something specifically, that has the power to have a dramatic impact on so many parts of your physiology, attitude, and all sorts of things. So how does that work? What does that look like? Well, we're going to dive into that after a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by the Harmony Equation, our live online workshop where you get to discover the world's simplest tool for resolving conflict and help your clients find harmony. Now, if you've got clients that seem stuck, blocked, and unable to move past certain issues, then chances are they have unresolved conflict, and the approaches you've been using so far haven't hit the spot. Well, you're going to love this event, and you and your clients will love the truly unique, powerful, and effortless way you can guide them to the resolutions they need once you have this tool in your hands. In fact, the work you'll learn at the event is so magical, I use it with nearly every client. As Ronnie, a previous attendee, says, you've created something very special and made it a simple and effective tool to cut out the complexities we add to our lives. The work you're doing really resonated with me and the work I'm now doing with my clients. So if you're a healer, a therapist, a coach, or do any kind of change work with clients, then this is an incredible tool to add to your skill set. So head over to www.thenpaacademy.com/harmony and grab your spot today. That's thenpaacademy.com/harmony to get all the details and join the Harmony Equation today. Well, what does this mean for us? How can we use this? Well, I'm going to go back to the New York Times article in particular. There's a good quote here from Dr. Frank Putnam, where he starts to bring it back into how we can relate to this or the lessons of it in our everyday life. So Dr. Putnam says, the lesson for psychophysiology from multiple personalities is that a given personality has as its biological underpinning a specific pattern of mental and biological states. And he goes on to say, there is a biological self that corresponds to the psychological self. As the psychological one shifts, so does the biology. Now, it's interesting because for quite a while I've been saying in relation to MPA and non-personal awareness, you just listen to the Harmony Equation ad, if you like, and it's talking about working with identities, or we certainly do talk about working with identities within MPA. And identity is the way that I refer to the different parts of ourselves and those many multiple parts of ourselves that are operating. And I say that when you work at the level of identity, then the beliefs, emotions, and behaviors shift all by themselves. And one of the frustrations that I see with people who are sort of taught to work just at the belief level is they don't understand why, a particular identity can be very creative. In fact, there's a piece in the other article. Let me just dig that back because I've made a note of it, so we come back to it. The American Scientific article, remember I said, it also displays compelling evidence that the human psyche is constantly active in producing personal units of perception and action that might be needed to deal with the challenges of life. So these identities are creative, and they can be very creative and slippery around the beliefs or emotional responses. They have their own life. So each of those identities inside of us have their own life, a bit like in the multiple personality situation. It's just everything's turned up to sort of maximum volume. But you can see that, in terms of working with ourselves, if we're looking at the different identities that are alive in us, then they have an impact on us physiologically. So going back to Dr. Putnam, who's done extensive research on patients with multiple personalities, and he says during the switch, this is where in multiple personalities they change from one to the other, and I'm going to relate this back to when we shift who we are in different situations. There is typically a period of seconds or even minutes when heart rate, breath rate, and other physiological markers show a disorganization, which is followed by a new pattern typical of the personality that is emerging. So if you work with people one-on-one or have done any length of transformational work yourself, you're going to recognize this. Maybe it's in a slowed down way, but often part of the transformation process is a period of chaos or not knowing or disorganization, as Dr. Putnam puts it. There's that disorder phase of change that happens within us. So again, if you turn the volume up on that, you can see that on a physiological level as well as a psychological level. It goes on to say some of the most striking changes occur in the tension levels of the person's facial muscles. It is almost as though the person were donning a new face, according to Dr. Putnam. So again, I look at that and go, well, isn't that what we do? We have different faces for different situations. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, I'm going to be authentic. That means I'm 100% me in every situation. Right. The fact is, contextually, depending on what's happening in your life, there'll be different personas that are operating. So again, you'll have your work self, and you'll have your you're at home, in your gym jam, slouching in front of Netflix self. There are different things that are going on in your brain and your physiology, all sorts of different parts. And one of the things that I find interesting, I'm not going to read the whole bit here, but Dr. Putnam talks about children change state quickly, and he gives the example of like from crying to laughing. You can watch children change state very quickly. We tend to slow it down when we're adults. And I think we've extended that in terms of the possibility of speed of change. I've often said about MPA. MPA works at identity level, and change can happen very, very fast. Now, it doesn't always. There's other reasons why it may be important to pace yourself in a slower way. I've seen other approaches which kind of force the issue, bust people's fuses, which I think is not healthy. We have to really honour our own pace. But the possibility of fast change and certainly fast healing is definitely available. And if you look at this, or these examples in the case of multiple personality, and feed it back into, we have multiple selves, what identity is operating, then it becomes rather exciting. So one of the things about the Harmony equation, today's sponsor, and www.thempiacademy.com/harmony, is the interactions between the parts within us can really block us up. You're more likely to get a smooth shift in a direction that's going to be healthy if you can work through the conflict that happens between these parts, because it may be that certain situations, it's fine to be to have this part of your personality active, or this part, this self in you active in one situation and then a different one in another. But there are often situations in life where those two are then in conflict, fighting for supremacy. And I've actually seen that a lot of the challenges, physical challenges, come down to a conflict that's happening inside. There isn't a sort of congruent or cogent active sense of self that's happening in relation to a certain situation. So what can you take away from this, and how can you apply it practically? Well, again, I'm going to reiterate, I'm not suggesting we go into that level of dissociation where we have full active personalities. But if you can take away the fact that we do have different parts within ourselves, and the same fundamental mechanism is available. It affects our physiology, our states, and even our thinking, feeling, and the beliefs that we hold. Then if you can become more conscious about what are the parts of you that are operating, and you can begin to notice that, you can begin to understand how maybe some forms of or states of being for you can be healthier than others or better for you than others. Or perhaps there's areas where you have different aspects of yourself that are in conflict, in which case I recommend you get your ass along to the Harmony equation and discover an amazing way to resolve that conflict. But MPA itself, again, you can always download the MPA process for free. If you haven't got access to that already, just go to any of my websites, joelyoungmpa.com, or if you go to the mpaacademy.com, you can find access to that. You just need to give me your email so I can send it to you. If you want to go straight there, you can go to npa4, that's number 4.me/sheet. I think that's the one. Anyway, I'll link it in the show notes. I'm now thinking to myself, is that the right one or is it MPA sheet? Ignore that. I'm not even going to edit it out. Go to the show notes and you'll find it. In fact, anywhere on the Be a Brilliant Human will have a link to the MPA process. So that's a long way around. So use that because it works at identity level. It can help you come into congruence. It can help you start to identify the parts of a play. And as a baseline, a great question to ask yourself in any situation that will help you begin to focus down this line as you open into the idea of how impactful your identities are, is ask yourself, who are you being in relation to any specific condition? Be that a health condition, a life situation, and notice that who you are being in relation to that does have a massive impact psychologically and also on a physiological level. I hope you found this topic as fascinating as I do. It really is quite amazing when you look at it, and you can extrapolate the basic ideas to the possibilities that we have as humans in terms of how our mind affects our body. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like it, go and tell someone about it. Otherwise, have a fantastic week, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this show, I'd love you to do me a solid and tell someone about it. They can find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and most other podcast platforms. Plus, if you visit the website www.beabrillianthuman.com, you can share the show notes to social media and make my day. Also, make sure you hit that follow button, and if you haven't yet downloaded the MPA process sheet, head on over to joelyoungmpa.com and get your free copy today. Big love, and see you next time.